I strongly want, my engineering group to be a place where people come to develop, right? Not just code, but themselves.
Welcome to the BigTime Podcast, where we have honest conversations with industry professionals who have advice that's right for you.
In this edition of the BigTime Podcast, we talk with Harrison Green-Fishback, CTO of Lineate. In a world where software development services have become a standard commodity, Harrison believes Lineate owes their success to a commitment to the highest quality. Harrison sat down with us to discuss how he makes it happen, as well as his deep insights on how to run a solid team. Welcome. I'm your host, Alexander, and I'm excited today to be joined by my guest, Harrison Green-Fishback, who's based in Portland, Oregon, and he's the CTO of Lineate. Good to have you on, Harrison.
Hey, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do we understand, just to kind of lay the foundation, when did Lineate begin, and when did you join on, and just how did it start?
Sure. So Lineate began about 18 years ago. I've been here for 5. It was founded by 2 partners, our CEO, Ben Engber, and our president of European operations, Dmitry Paskevich. Ben, at the time, was a freelance software developer, and he needed some additional help. He wound up working with a gentleman in Russia to outsource a bit of his work. Was really, truly impressed by the quality of the work that he got, and asked to continue that relationship. The gentleman in question said, "Hey, no, I'm a university professor, and this was really just a side gig for some extra holiday money. But I've got this great former student you should really talk to." That's Dmitry. They formed a partnership, and in fact, that university professor now works for us. He's one of our senior engineers, architects, and runs our internal software engineering school. So it's been a success for the 3 of them over the course of about 18 years. I mentioned I joined about 5 years ago as a solution architect and became the CTO here about a year and a half ago.
Now you paint a very rosy picture that, these 2 guys met, the things are good and everything's great. Your core focus, people are just running to you. Mm-hmm. Help me understand maybe the reality to that, and how have you been able to grow and overcome?
If you talked to me 10 years ago when I was a software engineer full time, I would have said, "Wow, I totally want to go work on some of those cool new NoSQL things." Right? That sounds fascinating. That's interesting. I've not seen it before, and that was true for a lot of software engineers at the time. Nowadays, it's a pretty standard thing to see on somebody's resume, right? So again, it's kind of come commodity. We're still very good at it, right? We've done a lot of it. We have a lot of experience using those tools to solve problems across a wide variety of domains. But it's not a differentiating factor at this point. So, more recently, we've taken a look at, cloud hosting, cloud services, and said, hey, some of the new serverless aspects of those offerings are very, very interesting. Really allow for a significant reduction in infrastructure and maintenance. I'll use the word overhead rather than cost, because it really is the overhead of humans interacting with them and maintaining things. So we're focusing heavily on that at this juncture, and also a cool thing that's not necessarily new, but it's newish, and it's certainly becoming more in demand. GraphQL as an API layer, as a data transport tool, as opposed to REST, which is in common use at this point. We see a lot of advantages there. We're also seeing a lot of interest in the market there, and so are making a point to become expert in that. For
you as a leader, how has your role changed since you began?
I remember when I first joined Lineate, prior to joining the company, I'd been a very happy senior software engineer building small compilers for the last 3 or 4 years. Really, really fun code. And I was actually the youngest person in the room at that company, right? And so I joined Lineate as a solution architect. I had led teams in the past, but all of a sudden I had a team, I think, of about 15 right off the bat in my first project within about a month of joining the company. And I was super excited. I suddenly discovered I was the oldest person in the room, which was new. And got on the phone with my team and was introducing myself. And I said something dumb off the top of my head. I don't remember what it was. I was just, oh, I've got this idea, right? And 2 days later, I get a message from the team lead. He said, okay, we built that, right? And I had inadvertently had a group of about 7 or 8 people go do like a couple full days worth of work, just based off of something that I said off the top of my head, right? Because they wanted to impress. I was their new solution architect, right? And so I said, oh my God, that's terrifying, right? And learned to be more measured with my words when talking to folks who very much want to go do what I want, because it's part of their job and they want to succeed at their job and they want to impress the boss. That's double or triply true now that I'm in a role as an executive, right? I really need to think about what it is that I'm saying, because employees want to do what their boss wants. That's pretty normal and it's great, right? They want to do what leadership is aiming them towards, but you have to be careful what you're aiming, because if you haphazardly shoot for something, boy, they'll go do it, and it's your fault, not theirs, that that time gets wasted or improperly spent.
Moving into a world where it's getting much smaller, and I think firms across the globe are going to be hiring folks more and more all over the place. So what would you say are some of the learnings that you've had or tactics that have worked to keep teams working well together when you're in different cultures and time zones?
There's a wonderful book, and I cannot remember the name of the author off the top of my head. I wish I could. But the title of the book is called Culture Map, or The Culture Map. And so if your watchers or listeners are interested, I highly recommend that book. It's fabulous. It's an easy read, and it does business case studies, cross-cultural business case studies. What can you expect if you've got an American and a Norwegian, right? What problems are you going to run into? And it actually classifies cultures into, I think, one of 3 different sort of categories, right? High context, sort of medium level context, and low context. And high context cultures assume that you and I, because we're in the same culture, share a really significant amount of context, right? And so a very simple phrase, or even just body language and gesture, carries a lot of information, right? So now imagine that you have 2 different high context cultures, right? Well, 2 people from 2 different high context cultures are going to communicate as though they are high context, because that's natural for them, right? But the context isn't the same. And so there's a lot of miscommunication that takes place. Low context cultures assume that we don't tend to have that shared background, that shared understanding. And so we explain stuff a lot more. In this book, I remember America was actually ranked as a very low context culture, which makes sense when you think about all of the immigration that has taken place over the years, right? And all of the different people who have had to learn to communicate with each other without shared context. And so really fascinating book. What would you say has been one of the most important hires that you've made recently? Recently, I was fortunate enough to meet a guy in Colorado. His name's Brandon Cass. He's a native English speaker, born, I believe, in Kansas, now lives in Colorado. Very talented software engineer who happens to have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in Russian and Slavic languages, speaks beautiful Russian. I won't say my Russian's beautiful, but I'm also pretty fluent. And so being able to hire someone here in the States who understands at a native level what it means to do business and sell things and provide services is huge, because that's something that we often have to teach to the folks we bring over. But then somebody who also can interact with our engineering teams in their native language, and more importantly, has a lot of experience working with their culture, has just been incredibly impactful. How do you keep good communication, both with yourself, with your team, as it continues to grow, as well as with the rest of the leadership, especially now as a VP, that everything is in line? So, I mean, we're widely distributed. We have 3 offices in Russia, one in Omsk, one in a town called Saratov on the Volga River south of Moscow, one in St. Petersburg. We've got an office in New York. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I mentioned Brandon, our solution architect. He's in Colorado. We have any number of employees who are remote in Russia. And then certainly in this last year with COVID, everybody's been remote. And so there's a balance between good frequent communication and meeting fatigue, right? And the ability to get, I'll call it real work done. Although by the time you're up in executive management, your real work is often mostly meetings, right? So, how do we keep the communication good? We always try and make sure that, only the people who are truly necessary are invited to a meeting. We try and keep our meetings short. We're firm believers in agile software development, in particularly agile Scrum. It's an industry standard at this point. It's been around for decades. And that calls for a short daily stand-up, right? But short is an operative word there. Short for a stand-up, a team of, 5 or 6 developers, no more than 15 minutes. And when you got 5 or 6 people talking to each other, it very, very easily becomes an hour-long conversation, right? So we try and limit the size and the length of our meetings. We try and keep meetings focused on a single topic. And then one of the things I think that I most enjoy, and I really encourage the management under me to do as well, is to meet with the people, not just your direct reports, but skip a level, right? And have a regular, maybe monthly meeting, right, depending on the number of people you're meeting with, where you meet just to check in and say hi and find out how things are going. Of course, you end up talking about business, but you're not there to tell them what to do. They're not there to escalate stuff to you. You're really just making sure that you're maintaining, human water cooler contact, which is something that's incredibly important for an office culture, and is something that doesn't easily exist in a very distributed, online workplace.
What do you do when the client comes back to you and they're disagreeing with what you've done, and they're wrong? Mm-hmm. Okay, they're in the wrong, but how do you handle that situation?
You be honest, and you look for a way to solve that problem for your client, right? That's just part of what being a consultant is. It's part of what being an engineer is, right? They're coming at you with problems. Sometimes they're technical, sometimes they're due to a misunderstanding. A lot of times when the client's wrong, in fact, you're wrong too, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that the customer is always right. I think that we all recognize that isn't always true. But the fact that you've gotten there means that there's a misunderstanding, right? And the fact that there's a misunderstanding means that somewhere along the lines, we dropped the ball doing our best job as consultants, right? Our job is to understand what our clients need, right? So if we get to a place where there's a misunderstanding, well, we missed a trick along the way. And then just being very honest and owning up to the fact that we're humans, right? And then saying, hey, you know what? This isn't exactly what you want. This isn't exactly what you expected. But here's a plan to fix it for you. Whether it's their fault or our fault or a mutual collection of fault, right? When you're able to say, yep, we hear you. That's wrong. You're right. That's wrong, right? Here's a plan to fix it for you. People tend to respond really beautifully to that. They want you to solve their problems for them, right? That's why they're hiring you. So we take that approach.
So for the future and just kind of where you guys are headed next, what do you see as the next big challenge that you're going to need to overcome as an organization to keep growing?
Size. It's easy when you're a room full of people, right? To communicate, to understand what your colleagues are doing. It gets harder when you're 100 people, right? In a single office. It gets a lot harder when you're 300 people in 3 main offices, plus remote, plus New York, plus various places in the United States. You suddenly find yourself in a position where you work for a place with a bunch of people that you've never met before, right? And that's its own challenge. So yeah, in a lot of ways, Lineate is at a place where we are recognizing our current size as something that we need to address in order to set ourselves up for future growth. And one of the ways we're doing that is by looking at ourselves and saying, you know what? The right number of people is about 30 or 40, right? That's the number of kids you have in a classroom, maybe a bit less. That's the number of people that most people know, right? I mean, you look at Facebook and you all pretend we have 500 friends, but you totally don't, right? These are the 500 or 600 people that you've met in your life that you remember, right? But your group of close friends is half a dozen, and your group of extended friends is 30 or 40. And I think that that's actually something that has been studied. It's sort of the size of a human group, right? And so one of the things that we're looking at now is saying to ourselves, how can we internally organize ourselves to create those groups, those classroom-sized groups of people that are very tight-knit, right? That know each other really well, and that will then facilitate really excellent work for our clients. Because when you're working with a group that you know really well, that you like, you do better work, right? And so we're trying to, in a way, internally scale ourselves down so that we can scale up, if that makes sense.
For more info, go to podcasts.bigtime.net and be sure to subscribe to the Big Time Podcast to get notified when our next episode goes live.